Yeah, it's very salty. But the flavor, how is that possible? It's so juicy, it melts in my mouth. I joke a lot about American food. This is one of the best things I've ever had. Americans, why don't you start with that? That's the best thing America has to offer, I think. So this is the brisket. It's hard to grab because it's falling apart faster than democracy in America. It's a jokey joke, yeah. I love America, okay.
There is one cut of beef that many Americans dismiss as too tough, something they would only feed to their dogs. Yet, after returning home from a trip to the United States, one European traveler was stunned to admit that back in his own country, he would have to pay 3 times as much for that exact same cut. And it is not just one thing. Europeans come to America, look inside American refrigerators, glance into kitchen trash cans, and are genuinely shocked by what they see people throwing away without a second thought. America has long been seen as the gold standard of consumer culture. If Americans do not want something, then it probably is not worth keeping, right? Not at all. The real question is this: why is the very same thing considered trash in one place, yet treated like a treasure somewhere else? Let's go back to that cut of beef we talked about a moment ago. What's it called? Skirt steak or hanger steak. Just hearing those names, they don't exactly sound glamorous, do they? These cuts come from the cow's lower belly, around the diaphragm. In the United States, they were once considered bargain cuts. Cheap, tough, long, awkward-looking, and nowhere near as attractive as a ribeye or a filet mignon sitting in the supermarket display case. There was a time when they were mostly ground into hamburger meat or, as folks in Texas used to do, sliced up for fajitas because cooking them really well took a little more effort. Now let me show you a few real comments I came across, so you can see I'm not making this up. One American home cook wrote, "Bought skirt steak on sale, cooked it just like a regular steak. Total waste of money, chewy, af." Another American commented, "That's a cheap cut for a reason. Good for tacos, that's it." Then someone who said they live in Lyon, France, pushed back with this, "Wait, you guys throw away bavette? That's literally the best cut on the menu here. We pay premium for it." Another comment, apparently from a chef in training at a French kitchen, said, "It's all about the cut and technique. Slice against the grain, quick sear, medium rare, max. Do that and it's better than a ribeye, honestly." 2 sets of comments, 2 completely different worlds looking at the very same piece of beef. So here's the question. Why is the very cut that many Americans have long treated as a bottom-tier piece of meat given its own respected names in France, anglaise and bavette, and turned into the centerpiece of steak frites, the iconic dish of Parisian bistros? The answer comes down to how people judge a piece of meat. French cuisine doesn't rank beef by tenderness or appearance, it ranks it by flavor. Skirt steak and hanger steak are prized for their rich, beefy taste. Trim away the tough membrane, slice against the grain, and cook them no further than medium rare, and they transform from a challenging cut into something tender and deeply flavorful. French chefs are trained to do exactly that. It's considered a fundamental skill. Meanwhile, American supermarket culture has traditionally favored cuts that look uniform, photograph well, and are easy to package on a large scale, not necessarily the ones with the most flavor. And that's what makes this so fascinating. The issue was never the quality of the meat, it was the fact that each culture has its own definition of what makes something delicious. One values appearance and convenience. The other values cooking technique and pure flavor. The very same cow, viewed through 2 different cultural lenses, gives the exact same cut of meat 2 completely different destinies. Just imagine this. If I packed a suitcase full of inexpensive hanger steaks from America and flew to Paris to sell them, I'd probably lose money because by American standards, I'd be selling them far too cheaply. That's the story with beef. But what if I told you the exact same thing is happening with the chicken you eat every week? Specifically, the part most people pass over to grab the breast instead.
Jess, that was brilliant.
Wow! This chicken is a good one.
Alright, now let's talk about chicken. The next time you're at the grocery store, pay attention to this. Which one usually costs less, chicken thighs or chicken breast? In the United States, more than 60% of all chicken sold is breast meat. Americans overwhelmingly prefer chicken breast because it's lean, easy to cook, and considered healthy. Thighs, wings, and drumsticks have traditionally been treated as secondary cuts, selling for much lower prices. At certain points, there was even such a surplus that the poultry industry had to export them at discounted prices or turn them into animal feed because domestic demand simply wasn't high enough. I came across a few comments that show this is something people really do debate. One American user wrote something that sounds pretty familiar. I literally only buy chicken breast. Thighs are too greasy and I don't even know what to do with the skin. Another American commenter, apparently focused on dieting, wrote, breast is the only lean protein option. Honestly, dark meat is basically a treat, not a staple. Then someone from Italy fired back, you guys are eating the wrong part the whole time. Thigh is where all the flavor is. Breast is what we give to the cat. Another comment, sounding like it came from a European chef, was a little more detailed. Dark meat has more iron, more flavor, cooks more forgiving too. Breast dries out if you look at it wrong. I genuinely don't understand the obsession. Two completely different conversations. Two completely different ways of looking at the very same chicken. Why is the part that Americans have long overlooked the very part that so many European chefs and consumers are willing to pay more for than chicken breast? Food science actually has a pretty clear explanation. Chicken thighs are dark meat. Because those muscles do more work, they contain more fat that creates flavor, along with higher levels of iron and zinc than chicken breast. As for America's preference for white meat, that traces back to a very specific public health movement during the 1960s and 1970s when American medical experts repeatedly warned about cholesterol and dietary fat. That shifted the country's eating habits toward the idea that white meat and low fat automatically meant healthier. Europe never experienced that shift to quite the same degree, so many people continued cooking and eating the whole chicken instead of drawing such a sharp line between white and dark meat. And here's the fascinating part. It turns out chicken thighs were never nutritionally inferior to chicken breast. Instead, an entire generation of Americans was conditioned to favor white meat because of a health scare that began half a century ago. The next time you're at the grocery store, take a look at how much cheaper the chicken thighs are than the chicken breast and ask yourself why. That's the story with meat. But what if I told you that one of the most surprising items on this list, something as ordinary as bread, follows the exact same pattern? Now we come to what might be the most surprising item on this list: bread. Every year, the United States throws away an enormous amount of food. Industry estimates put the number at around 60 million tons, nearly 40% of the nation's entire food supply. And among the first things to be discarded is bread. In many supermarkets and bakeries, a loaf that's just one day old is automatically treated as unsellable and thrown away, even though it's still perfectly good to eat. Let me show you a few comments I came across. One American user, who appeared to have worked in retail, wrote, "Worked at a bakery counter, we tossed entire trays of bread every single night. Store policy has to look fresh." Another American commented, "Honestly, if it's more than a day old, I just throw it out. Who wants stale bread?" Then someone from Italy pushed back, "Wait, you just throw it away? We literally have a whole cuisine built around day-old bread. It's not stale, it's an ingredient." Another comment from France went into more detail. In France, it's basically illegal for big supermarkets to throw away unsold food. They have to donate it. Bread from yesterday becomes Pain, Perdue, or Panzanella tomorrow. Feels wasteful reading this thread. Why is it that the exact same loaf of bread left overnight is considered trash in America, yet becomes the foundation of an entire culinary tradition in France? France has had a law since 2016 that prohibits large supermarkets from throwing away unsold food, requiring them to donate it instead. But the story goes much deeper than legislation. Europe has spent centuries building a culture around wasting as little as possible. From Pain Perdue and bread pudding to apps like Too Good To Go, which began in Denmark, yesterday's bread becomes tomorrow's bargain instead of tomorrow's garbage. The United States modernized its supermarket system at an incredible pace, but the culture of reusing food never developed to the same extent. And here's the fascinating part. In America, freshness is often treated as the measure of value. In much of Europe, knowing how to make use of what you already have is what truly defines value. So, if you leave a loaf of bread on the kitchen counter overnight, do you throw it away or turn it into garlic toast? Day-old bread can still have a second life. But what about an apple? Once it no longer looks perfect, does it still stand a chance? From day-old bread, let's move to something that seems even more ordinary: an apple. The United States once had more than 15,000 native apple varieties. Every region, every small orchard had its own unique apples, each with different shapes, colors, and flavors. But by the end of the 20th century, American supermarkets had narrowed that selection down to just about 11 varieties, accounting for more than 90% of all apple sales. Red Delicious alone once made up more than 40% of the market. Thousands of heirloom varieties were pushed aside because their rough skin, irregular shapes, or poor ability to survive long-distance shipping made them unsuitable for supermarket shelves. Many of those varieties came dangerously close to disappearing altogether. I came across a few comments that tell the story. One American user wrote, "Grocery store rejects any apple with a single blemish. Doesn't matter if it tastes fine, straight to the compost." Another American commented, "Grew up on a small orchard. Half our ugly apples got dumped or fed to cattle because stores wouldn't take them." Then someone from England pushed back. "Those ugly, bittersweet apples are exactly what cider makers here are dying to get." The sourer and scruffier, the better, honestly. Another comment, sounding like it came from a craft cider maker, said, "Perfect supermarket apples make boring cider. We want the gnarly heirloom stuff every single time." Why is it that the apples rejected by the American supermarket system, simply because they aren't pretty, are exactly the ones European cider makers are eager to get their hands on? The answer is that apples grown for fresh eating and apples grown for cider are judged by two completely different standards. Fresh eating apples need to be sweet, attractive, and uniform enough for grocery store shelves. Traditional cider apples, especially bitter-sweet and bitter-sharp varieties, are naturally more tannic, smaller, and far less attractive. They're exactly the kinds of apples American supermarkets reject from the very beginning. In England and France, cider making has preserved an appreciation for those distinctive bitter and tannic flavors across generations. In the United States, however, many cider orchards were destroyed during Prohibition in the early 20th century, breaking much of that tradition and leaving fresh-eating apples as the dominant standard. And here's the fascinating part. What counts as ugly in the fresh apple business is exactly what counts as ideal in the cider business. The value of an apple has never been about how it looks. It depends entirely on what you plan to do with it. That apple with the brown spots you tossed out this morning might be exactly what a cider maker in Somerset has been searching for over the years. We've talked about food, now let's move on to drinks. There's one soft drink that's so common and inexpensive in America that people barely think about it, while many Europeans have to order it from across the Atlantic just to get a taste. The last item on the list, and probably the one that will surprise you the most, is root beer, along with regional American soft drinks like Dr. Pepper, Cheerwine, and Faygo. In the United States, these are just everyday sodas. Walk into almost any supermarket, Walmart, or neighborhood convenience store, and you can pick up a six-pack for just a few dollars. Root beer, with its distinctive sassafras and vanilla flavor, is practically a childhood drink for generations of Americans. It's so inexpensive and so common that hardly anyone thinks of it as anything special. I came across a few comments that really show just how wide this gap is. One American user wrote, "Root beer is like the most basic soda ever. My kids drink it like water. It's literally on sale every week." Another American commented, "Dr. Pepper is a gas station staple here. Nobody thinks twice about grabbing one for like $1. Then someone from England replied, "We have entire shops here dedicated to importing American soda. I paid like £3 for one can of root beer, and it sold out in days." Another comment, sounding like it came from someone who sells imported American products online, said, "Root beer has zero European equivalent. People are genuinely curious what it tastes like. We can't keep it in stock." Why does a can of soda that's stacked on supermarket shelves across America for next to nothing become an imported specialty item in Europe, selling for 3 or 4 times the price? There are 2 reasons working together. The first is the flavor. Root beer is built around the distinctive taste of sassafras and vanilla, a flavor profile that's uniquely American and almost non-existent in traditional European soft drinks. For many Europeans, it feels both unfamiliar and deeply connected to the image of America they grew up seeing in movies and on television. The second is the recipe. American soft drinks are often sweetened with high fructose corn syrup instead of cane sugar, creating a sweetness and texture that many Europeans find noticeably different. That makes people curious to taste the authentic American version instead of the localized recipes they're used to. And here's the fascinating part. The very reason root beer is considered nothing more than a cheap, everyday soda in America is because it's everywhere. It's familiar, it's ordinary. Yet those same qualities are exactly what make it rare and exciting in places where people have never grown up with it. Scarcity, not quality, is what creates value. A can of root beer that costs about 50 cents at an American convenience store can sell in London for nearly the price of an entire meal. And after hearing all 5 stories, beef, chicken, bread, apples, and soft drinks, you've probably noticed the same pattern repeating itself over and over again. That's no coincidence. Because this is where all of those pieces finally come together. So what is really happening here? Looking back at all 5 stories, beef, chicken, bread, apples, and soft drinks, they're all telling the same story. The only thing that changes is the ingredient. There are 3 patterns that keep showing up again and again. First, standards of appearance. An oddly shaped cut of beef or a less than perfect apple both get rejected because they don't look good enough by American retail standards. But those standards were never universal truths. They're simply conventions created to make products easier to display, package, and sell on a massive scale. Second, the loss of tradition. Day-old bread gets thrown away, cider apples are forgotten, not because Americans don't know how to make use of them, but because the United States modernized at an extraordinary pace. In just a few decades, supermarkets replaced local markets, leaving little time for the country to preserve the waste-nothing traditions that Europe had spent centuries developing. Third, reverse scarcity. Chicken thighs and root beer are inexpensive in America because they're everywhere, but in places where they're rare or unfamiliar, they immediately become more valuable. That's simply the law of supply and demand, not proof that Americans are wasteful or that Europeans are somehow more sophisticated. Put those 3 ideas together, and a much bigger truth begins to emerge. The value of something isn't built into the object itself. Its value depends on where you're standing and whether that thing is rare enough in that place for people to appreciate it. And once you understand that, the next question is no longer who's right and who's wrong. The real question becomes this: what are the things we have in abundance all around us, yet still fail to recognize as valuable? And this is where I want to pause for a moment, because this isn't just about beef or soft drinks anymore. We rarely recognize the value of the things we have in abundance until we see someone else longing for them. The cut of meat you walk right past at the grocery store, the apple you toss into the trash because of one small blemish, the can of soda you drink without giving it a second thought. Somewhere else, for someone else, those are the very things they wait for, special order, or pay a premium to enjoy. This isn't meant as criticism. It's not about saying Americans are wasteful, and it's certainly not about claiming Europeans somehow appreciate life more. It's simply this: abundance has a quiet way of making us stop noticing what we already have. And if there's one thing I hope this video leaves you with, it's this. The next time you pick up something so familiar that it barely catches your attention, whether it's a cut of meat, a loaf of bread, or a can of soda, take one more look at it through the eyes of someone who's never had the chance to have it. This is simply my own perspective, based on what I've researched and put together. It's not meant to judge one culture as better or worse than another. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and let me know in the comments. In your country, what's something that's considered worthless but highly prized somewhere else? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.